On a breezy March morning in New Orleans, Officer Naomi Carter's life took an unexpected turn when her longtime partner, Detective James Martinez, was promoted, leaving her in need of a new ally on the force. Enter Officer Tamara Johnson, a transfer from the 3rd District. Known for her sharp mind and military background, Tamara was a decorated officer with an impressive record, her precision honed during her years as an MP in the U.S. Army. Naomi and Tamara quickly became an unstoppable duo in the 8th District. Their contrasting styles, Naomi's gut instincts and Tamara's meticulous approach, complemented each other, transforming routine cases into quick closures. The city's bustling French Quarter became their territory, a place where they could rely on each other in life-or-death situations. But beyond the professional front, Tamara opened her personal life to Naomi, sharing stories of her marriage to Marcus Johnson, a prominent tech consultant. Tamara often spoke of her stepson, Jamal, a bright, ambitious 22-year-old computer science major at Tulane University. Their family circle was tight-knit, a support system for Tamara as she balanced her demanding career and family life. On the surface, their lives were picture-perfect. But Naomi soon found herself captivated by Jamal, the young man whose life seemed so intertwined with dreams and ambitions Naomi had once held for herself. One warm July evening, Naomi joined Tamara's family for dinner at their historic Esplanade Avenue home. Tamara's invitation was a gesture of friendship, a way to bring Naomi into her family's circle. Naomi had never felt the warmth of a family like this before, and as she exchanged polite conversation with Jamal, she found herself unexpectedly drawn to his intelligence and enthusiasm. Their conversation flowed easily. Jamal's dreams of working in artificial intelligence, his stories about university life, and his passion for technology all intrigued her. Naomi felt a spark, something forbidden yet impossible to ignore. For years, she'd been married to her badge and her duty, rarely allowing herself to feel much of anything outside of the job. But Jamal was different. He made her feel alive again. That night, as she lay in bed, Naomi couldn't shake the memory of Jamal's intense, thoughtful gaze. She told herself it was just a passing attraction, something she'd soon forget. But the seed of an obsession had already taken root. Over the following weeks, Naomi found herself returning to the Johnson residence more frequently. She volunteered for patrol routes that passed by Tulane University, hoping for a glimpse of Jamal. What started as casual interactions became a steady stream of messages exchanged under the guise of professional mentorship. She convinced herself that she was merely supporting his career aspirations, but her actions told a different story. Naomi's colleagues noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She became distant, her mind seemingly elsewhere during routine briefings. Her new partner, Tamara, assumed it was the usual stress that came with their line of work, but she couldn't help noticing Naomi's unusual fixation on her family's personal life. Naomi had always been a private person, yet now she seemed deeply involved in the minutiae of Tamara's world. One day, Tamara invited Naomi to lunch, hoping to understand what was troubling her friend and partner. Over cups of coffee, Tamara opened up about Jamal's academic struggles, his frustrations with graduate school applications, and his father's pressure to join the family's business. Naomi listened intently, her heart racing as she learned more about the young man who had become the center of her thoughts. After that conversation, Naomi's obsession only grew. She spent hours combing through Jamal's social media profiles, piecing together details about his life, his likes, and his aspirations. Her actions crossed professional lines, but she couldn't stop herself. The line between mentor and something far more personal began to blur. By September, Naomi's visits to the university campus had become routine. One afternoon, she waited outside the library, hoping to accidentally run into Jamal. When he spotted her, his face lit up with surprise and genuine warmth. "Officer Carter. Fancy seeing you here," he said, a friendly smile playing on his lips. "Please, call me Naomi," she replied, her voice softer than usual. "I was just in the area and thought I'd stop by. How's school going?" They sat down for coffee, and their conversation flowed easily. Naomi found herself captivated by Jamal's thoughts on technology, his aspirations, and the challenges he faced. As they talked, she felt a connection that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She was a seasoned officer, dedicated to her work, but Jamal's presence made her feel vulnerable, young, and alive. Their coffee meetings became more frequent, slipping into late-night text exchanges and secret rendezvous at quiet spots around the city. Naomi knew it was wrong, but the thrill was intoxicating. She became bold, emboldened by the idea that Jamal needed her guidance, her understanding. In her journal, Naomi poured out her conflicted feelings. She wrote of her guilt, her desire, and her need to protect him from a life of conformity and mediocrity. Her attraction had morphed into something deeper, a belief that she alone could nurture his potential. Tamara noticed the changes in Jamal as well. He'd become withdrawn, defensive, often sneaking out late at night or brushing off family dinners. She was baffled by his behavior, unsure of what had shifted in their once happy home. The young man who had once confided in her now seemed to be hiding parts of himself, shrouded in secrecy and distance. At the precinct, she brought up her concerns to Naomi, who listened with practiced calm. Tamara confessed her fears, suspecting that someone was influencing her stepson, pulling him away from his family's values. "Sometimes, I feel like he's slipping through my fingers," Tamara said, her voice laced with worry. "He's changed, Naomi. It's like there's someone else, someone who's pushing him to turn away from us." Naomi's heart pounded, but she maintained her composure. "Maybe he just needs space, Tamara," she replied, her tone measured. "Young adults go through phases. He'll come around." But Tamara wasn't convinced. She sensed an invisible barrier between herself and her partner, something unspoken yet palpable. The woman who had once been her trusted confidant now felt like a stranger, an outsider within her own family. As winter crept in, Naomi's obsession escalated. She began researching step-parent rights, reading up on custody battles, and contemplating how she might secure a place in Jamal's life permanently. Her journal entries became darker, filled with fantasies of a life where only she could guide Jamal, protect him, and fulfill his potential. The turning point came in March, when Tamara confided to Naomi that she planned a family intervention. "I think we need to take a firm hand," she explained, her voice trembling with conviction. "Maybe even restrict his access to his trust fund until he's ready to focus on his future." Naomi's heart filled with dread. In her mind, Tamara had become an obstacle, a barrier between herself and Jamal's happiness. The thought of Jamal being controlled by his family filled her with a rage she could barely contain. That night, her journal entry was chilling: "She has to be stopped. I'm the only one who truly understands him, who can set him free." The idea took root, a plan forming in the recesses of her mind. She would protect Jamal at any cost, even if it meant removing the one person standing in her way. On March 31st, during what was supposed to be a routine patrol, Naomi's plan set into motion. She and Tamara were called to respond to an armed suspect sighting at a Victorian mansion on Britannia Street. The operation was supposed to be straightforward, but Naomi saw it as an opportunity, a final chance to be rid of the woman who had become her rival. As they approached the house, Naomi's heart raced. Her mind calculated every move, her training in firearms and tactics guiding her hand. But as the suspect emerged, gun in hand, she made a fateful choice. Instead of covering her partner, Naomi adjusted her position, aligning her shot in a way that created a direct line of fire toward Tamara. 3 shots echoed into the night, 2 aimed at the suspect, but the third, a fatal shot, struck Tamara. The last thing Naomi saw in her partner's eyes was a flash of betrayal, a silent question, before the life drained from them. "Officer down! Officer down!" Naomi shouted into her radio, her voice a blend of false panic and hidden triumph. Her call for help was swift, calculated, a cover for the deed she had just committed. But as the paramedics arrived and Tamara was pronounced dead, Naomi's sense of victory was short-lived. A police investigation would soon uncover the inconsistencies in her story, the missteps that revealed her intentions. As the investigation deepened, forensic analysts began to notice discrepancies in Naomi's account. Her story unraveled under the scrutiny of ballistics experts, who found that the fatal shot could only have come from Naomi's deliberate positioning. When her journal was uncovered, filled with obsessive declarations and chilling plans, the truth became undeniable. In the courtroom, Naomi faced Jamal, who looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and horror. His trust had been shattered, his life torn apart by the woman he once saw as a mentor and friend. In her final journal entry, written from her prison cell, Naomi reflected on the path she had chosen. "I thought I was saving him, but I see now that I destroyed everything I touched." In the days after Tamara's death, a heavy silence settled over the precinct. Every officer felt the weight of her absence, the sharp reminder of how fragile their lives truly were. At the memorial, Naomi was the picture of composure, her uniform pristine, her face a mask of dignified sorrow. She moved among the mourners, offering steady words of comfort to Tamara's husband, Marcus, whose grief was written in every line of his face. But for those who looked closely, something in Naomi's demeanor felt off, too measured, too detached. As the internal review of the shooting unfolded, Detective Marcus Rodriguez, a veteran known for his meticulous eye, couldn't shake the feeling that Naomi's account of the incident didn't quite add up. Her retelling of the events felt rehearsed, almost mechanical, lacking the raw emotion one might expect from someone who had just lost a trusted partner. The words were all there, but the weight behind them was missing, leaving Rodriguez with an uneasy feeling. Driven by his instincts, Rodriguez began a quiet investigation, scrutinizing every detail, every line of Naomi's story. He replayed her statements in his mind, searching for the subtle contradictions that had raised his suspicions. He had no concrete evidence, just a nagging sense that something darker lingered beneath her polished exterior. But he knew that if there was truth to his suspicions, he owed it to Tamara, and to the badge they both wore, to find it. And so, silently and methodically, he began his search for the cracks in Naomi's carefully crafted facade. Jamal felt as though he were adrift in a sea of sorrow, his world fractured and submerged in darkness after Tamara's death. She had been the rock in his life, the one who had believed in his potential, guiding him with unwavering patience and love. Her absence left an unbearable void, a raw emptiness that clung to him like a shadow, one he couldn't escape. Friends, family, even Marcus, seemed unable to reach him, as he retreated deeper into isolation, losing himself in memories of her gentle encouragement and moments that now felt painfully fleeting. As he struggled to navigate his grief, Naomi reached out, her messages and calls arriving late into the night. At first, Jamal felt a flicker of gratitude for her concern, the comfort of someone who had also known Tamara. But soon, Naomi's words took on a tone that unsettled him, her condolences laced with something unspoken. She seemed to linger on their shared loss with an intimacy that felt forced, an understanding that felt too familiar, almost intrusive. She spoke of Tamara in a way that made Jamal feel as if she were searching for something beyond condolence, a connection he hadn't asked for and didn't want. What had started as a respectful offer of companionship soon morphed into something invasive, leaving Jamal feeling exposed. Her messages were relentless, each one edging past the boundaries of empathy and into something more sinister. It wasn't long before his initial gratitude soured, replaced by a gnawing discomfort that hinted at a truth he couldn't yet name. He began to sense that Naomi's intentions were far from the pure concern she tried to project. One day, while sorting through Tamara's belongings, Jamal stumbled upon a small notebook she had often used to jot down her thoughts. The sight of her handwriting was like a wound reopening, bringing back a flood of memories and a yearning for her presence. But as he leafed through the pages, his breath caught at a note that stopped him cold. Tamara had written about Naomi, voicing a worry that now felt like a warning reaching across the void. Naomi's been asking about Jamal's decisions. I worry she's influencing him in ways I don't understand. The words sent a chill through him, chillingly perceptive, as if Tamara had sensed something beneath Naomi's surface long before he had. He reread the line, his hands trembling, his heart pounding with a mixture of dread and disbelief. Naomi's attention, which had once felt like a simple kindness, now seemed darker, more calculated. Had Tamara known something? Seen something in Naomi's behavior that Jamal, blinded by his grief, had missed? The realization gnawed at him, creeping into every interaction he remembered with Naomi, every message she had sent, every comforting word that now felt twisted in hindsight. The memory of her lingering texts, her too intense assurances, transformed in his mind from gestures of friendship to something manipulative, possessive, a desperate bid to insert herself deeper into his life. Jamal's grief deepened, laced now with the seeds of suspicion and fear. He felt the loss of his stepmother more acutely than ever, haunted by the possibility that her concerns had been more than paranoia. In that moment, he knew he would need to tread carefully, for he was only beginning to understand the full scope of Naomi's intentions. Detective Rodriguez sat in the dim light of his office, poring over Naomi Carter's body camera footage, a sense of unease gnawing at him. The case had troubled him from the beginning, but now he felt something darker lurking beneath the surface. Each frame from the footage replayed in his mind as he scrutinized the trajectory data of the bullets fired. He followed the numbers, meticulously matching Naomi's own account with the forensic evidence. But something didn't sit right. Then he found it, the anomaly. The angle of the fatal shot that struck Tamara didn't align with Naomi's reported position. According to the trajectory, the shot would have required Naomi to be positioned just slightly differently. Rodriguez's pulse quickened. This was more than a minor discrepancy, it was a red flag. He leaned back, his mind racing as he pieced together the unsettling implications. Determined to dig deeper, he requested security footage from nearby buildings, hoping for clarity. As he fast-forwarded through the frames, a disturbing scene began to unfold. He watched as Naomi made subtle, almost imperceptible adjustments to her position, inching her way to a vantage point that would allow a clean shot. It was calculated, precise, and undeniable. The woman who had been trusted as Tamara's partner was moving with intent. Rodriguez felt a chill settle over him, a haunting suspicion that gnawed at his resolve. He had worked cases involving betrayal before, but this was different. This was one officer betraying another, and it struck a nerve. Without hesitation, he gathered his findings and went straight to Captain Reynolds, his voice taut with urgency. "We need to reopen the case," Rodriguez declared, the weight of his discovery pressing down on him. "Something doesn't add up, and I believe we owe it to Tamara to find out why." The captain hesitated, clearly disturbed by the implications, but the evidence was too strong to ignore. With a reluctant nod, he authorized an internal review of Naomi's actions. And with that, a shadow began to creep over the department, casting doubt where there had once been loyalty and camaraderie. As Rodriguez left the captain's office, he knew this investigation would be a storm that would shake their precinct to its core. But he pressed forward, driven by the need for justice, hoping that the truth would finally bring peace to Tamara's memory, even if it tore their department apart. Marcus was still reeling from the news when he arrived at Naomi's apartment, his mind a whirlwind of disbelief and anger. The very idea that Naomi, his wife's trusted partner, could be implicated in Tamara's death was too horrifying to comprehend. The accusations felt surreal, but the evidence was undeniable, and he had to confront her, to demand answers. He knocked sharply, and when Naomi opened the door, he was struck by the sight of her standing there, calm and composed, as if nothing were wrong. She gestured for him to come in, but he barely crossed the threshold before the words erupted from him. "Naomi, they're saying you might have had something to do with Tamara's death," he stammered, his voice thick with a mix of grief and rage. "How could you let something like this happen? How could you do this to her, to us?" For a moment, silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the soft ticking of a nearby clock. Naomi held his gaze, her face devoid of emotion, as if the accusations were merely a mild inconvenience. She didn't flinch, didn't show a trace of guilt. Instead, she gave a measured reply, her voice steady and controlled. "Marcus, you know I would never harm Tamara. I loved her like a sister," she said, her words smooth but distant. "This is all a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation. You have to trust me." But something in her eyes betrayed her, a cold detachment, a lack of remorse that chilled him to the core. Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine as he searched her face for a hint of the truth, something to prove the woman he was speaking to wasn't a stranger. He wanted to believe her, to cling to the hope that there had been some kind of mistake. Yet, that flicker in her gaze, a flash of something dark and calculating, left him with a gnawing sense of dread. Realizing he wouldn't find the answers he was searching for, Marcus backed away, murmuring an excuse as he turned to leave. But as he stepped outside, a terrible certainty began to settle over him. The woman he had trusted to stand beside his wife, to protect their family, was no longer the Naomi he thought he knew. As weeks passed, the investigation took a dark and twisted turn, uncovering layers of Naomi's obsession that shocked even the most seasoned detectives. Detective Rodriguez and his team combed through her life meticulously, unearthing disturbing clues hidden in plain sight. Naomi's cell phone logs, extensive social media searches, and pages of journal entries revealed a mind completely overtaken by a consuming infatuation with Jamal. In a folder buried on her personal computer, Rodriguez found something that turned his blood cold, hundreds of photos of Jamal, taken secretly and catalogued with a precision that felt more like stalking than admiration. The journal entries were even more unsettling, with each page a descent into Naomi's delusional world. She had convinced herself that she was saving him, guarding him from the people who suffocated him. One haunting entry, written days before Tamara's death, read, "She doesn't understand him the way I do. She's a barrier, keeping us from the life we could have together." The deeper they looked, the more the evidence painted a horrifying picture of a woman consumed by obsession. Rodriguez, seasoned and unshakable, found himself taken aback by the intensity of her fixation and the ruthless lengths she was willing to go. As he read through her entries, his disbelief grew, each page revealing a woman willing to do anything, even destroy lives, to fulfill the fantasy she had created. It was now painfully clear that Naomi's obsession wasn't just a passing fixation, it was a ticking time bomb that had finally exploded, leaving devastation in its wake. Jamal sat in a dimly lit room, his hands trembling as he sifted through the evidence taken from Naomi's computer. What he uncovered shattered every notion he had of her, a collection of photos taken without his knowledge, hundreds of messages chronicling an obsession, and journal entries that revealed a mind twisted by delusion. It was like stepping into a nightmare, each word a reminder that the woman he once considered a trusted mentor had been manipulating him all along, pulling strings from the shadows to control his life. Days later, as he took the stand in court, Jamal's voice shook with raw emotion, a blend of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak spilling out with each word. "I thought she cared about me as a friend, as a mentor," he began, his voice faltering as he met the eyes of the woman who had betrayed him so completely. "I never imagined she was capable of this level of manipulation, of going to such lengths to control me." Across the courtroom, Naomi sat with a stony expression, unreadable and detached, yet as Jamal spoke, he saw something flicker in her eyes, a twisted hint of satisfaction, as if she was savoring the power she once held over him. That small, chilling glint froze him to his core, a reminder of the darkness she had hidden behind her carefully composed mask. It was in that moment Jamal understood fully the depths of her betrayal, and he knew his life would be forever haunted by the shadow of her obsession. The trial was electrifying, a scandalous spectacle that captivated all of New Orleans. Reporters filled the courtroom, cameras clicking incessantly as they documented the story that had gripped the city. The prosecution wasted no time presenting an overwhelming case against Naomi Carter. Piece by piece, they laid out the dark tapestry of her obsession, a shocking collection of journal entries, photographs, and, perhaps most damningly, a ballistics report that left no doubt, the shot that killed Tamara Johnson had come from Naomi's own weapon, and it had been intentional. For the first few days, Naomi held her ground with an eerie calm, her face unreadable. She answered the questions with calculated precision, portraying herself as a misunderstood protector, claiming that her actions were motivated only by her concern for Jamal. To the outside world, she tried to appear as a tragic hero, someone who had gone to extremes only because she wanted to shield him from what she saw as a controlling family. But as the prosecution continued to unveil the extent of her obsession, Naomi's facade began to crack. Each piece of evidence brought her closer to the edge, and the carefully curated image she had built started to crumble. The jury listened intently as the prosecutor read aloud her journal entries, filled with disturbing fantasies about saving Jamal and casting herself as his only true guardian. Witnesses described her stalking behavior, her manipulative influence, and the obsessive lengths she had gone to in order to insert herself into his life. By the time the mountain of evidence had been presented, the courtroom felt thick with tension. Naomi's face, once steely and defiant, was now etched with fear, and under the unrelenting weight of her own words, her composure shattered. In a voice laced with desperation, she finally confessed, her words echoing through the silent courtroom. "I couldn't stand seeing him held back, suffocated by people who didn't understand him," she murmured, her eyes filled with a twisted conviction. Tamara was a barrier. I had to remove her. I did it for him. Her words hung heavy in the air, leaving the entire room in stunned silence. Those present were paralyzed, shocked by the sheer depth of her delusion. Naomi Carter, a once decorated officer, had revealed herself as a woman consumed by a dangerous obsession, willing to cross any line in the name of a love only she believed in. The chilling confession laid bare the disturbing truth, a revelation that would haunt everyone who had witnessed it. The courtroom was silent, breath held in collective anticipation, as the judge's gavel fell with finality. Naomi Carter had been convicted, her life now condemned to the gray walls of a prison cell with no chance of parole. The judge's words reverberated through the room, carrying the weight of her crimes and the shattered lives left in her wake. Naomi stood motionless, her expression unyielding, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the walls, as if peering into a future she knew was now forever lost. Jamal sat among the spectators, his face etched with a mix of relief and deep sadness. Watching her now, he struggled to reconcile the mentor he once trusted with the stranger she had become, a woman so consumed by obsession that she destroyed his family and his sense of innocence. What Naomi had taken from him was more than a loved one, she had stolen a piece of his faith in others, leaving him with a scar that would never fully heal. In that moment, Jamal realized he would forever be haunted by the memory of her deception, a reminder of how close darkness could lurk behind a trusted face. As the guards escorted Naomi out, she spared a final glance toward him, a hollow look, empty of remorse, her face a mask of what she had once pretended to be. And as she disappeared from sight, Jamal felt a heavy finality settle over him, knowing he had glimpsed the depths of betrayal, and survived. After the trial, Marcus and Jamal tried to rebuild their lives, visiting Tamara's grave often, leaving white roses as a tribute to the woman who had been the heart of their family. The pain of betrayal and loss lingered, but they took solace in each other, supporting one another as they navigated the aftermath. As time passed, Jamal returned to his studies, focusing on his career and slowly moving beyond the shadow of Naomi's actions. He resolved to live a life that honored Tamara's memory, using the strength she had instilled in him to move forward. Back in her prison cell, Naomi penned a final entry in her journal. "I thought I was saving him, that we could build something beautiful. But all I did was ruin everything. I am the villain of my own story, a fool lost in my own obsessions." Her words, a haunting reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded, were the last echoes of a love turned deadly, leaving behind a legacy of pain and sorrow that no one would ever forget.